So the 2 or 3 first days of the German attack, the Americans were totally exhausted with constant fighting day and night and so forth, and we're lacking supplies, and higher authorities, and there's nothing we can do here. Retreat.
The Americans fall back towards Bastogne, a transportation hub, which includes roads to the all-important crossings along the Meuse River. Allied command issues orders. Hold Bastogne at any cost. The 101st Airborne Division is sent to reinforce the town. For 3 days in the cold and snow and without air support, the 101st and remnants of the 10th Armored Division fight off repeated attempts by the Germans to take Bastogne. On December 19th, frustrated by the stubborn U.S. defense, the 5th Panzer Army's main armored force is ordered to bypass Bastogne and continue their advance toward the bridges on the Meuse River. Concerned that Bastogne will be encircled, Allied command orders General George Patton's 3rd Army to the rescue. Patton's forces are in France, 260 kilometers away. He orders an immediate mass movement of 3 divisions north to Bastogne. At the spearhead are 127 tanks of the 4th Armored Division.
At about 8:30 that night, I was told to be ready to move. About 50 minutes after midnight, heading north. He had to turn his army 90 degrees. And that's where we went on to the Bulge. My tank and my battalion were the lead elements of Patton's 3rd Army to make this 161-mile approach march to Bastogne. The situation was absolutely unknown. We went all night, all day, over snowy, icy roads. The weather was horrible, bitter wind. The last night was under total blackout conditions. You can't imagine to have a black night and be traveling blackout. All the tanks had were little things called cat's eyes in the rear. So the tank commander is looking at the tank in front of him at the cat's eyes, and that enables him to know where he's going and how much distance he is from the tank. But I was in the front tank, and there were no cat's eyes in front of me. There was nothing. And we saw a sign that said, Neufchâteau, Bastogne. And we thought he stopped.
32 Sherman tanks of the 8th Battalion reached the outskirts of Bastogne in less than 24 hours.
That was a tough march. It was the greatest mass movement of men in the shortest period of time in military history. But every tank made it.
But by the time they arrive, the Germans have already surrounded Bastogne. The Americans in the city are trapped. And across the Ardennes, so are many others, like tanker John Marshall, who's just trying to find his way back to friendly lines.
We were hoping to find our platoon or anybody. We were moving, and as we moved up, I saw 2 guys come out from between the buildings, and they walked down the road. They walked quite militarily. Max says to me, "Get him." And I didn't. For some reason, they weren't bothering anybody. I should have known better. I should have done what I was told. I didn't. And as they walked, they made a military left turn and went right between a barn and a house. They turned like it was on a signal, and at the end of that street, there's a tank there. And the minute they turned, that tank let the shot go, and he fires at us. It just went over. It missed the tank. Allier makes a hard left lever, and he goes down the lane. And as we go down, we could see a crowd surrendering. He looked like a kid. We knew something was wrong. As we go down, there is the two officers. And they jump up with the Panzer Force, and they fire at us.
December 21st, 1944. It's day 5 at the Battle of the Bulge. The German armored offensive now extends 60 kilometers into Belgium, and many Americans are still trapped inside the Bulge. John Marshall of the 707th Tank Battalion is one of them, and he's trying to find his way back to American lines.
As we go down the lane, we could see a crowd surrendering. We knew something was wrong. And there is the two officers. And they jump up with the Panzer Force.
Panzerfaust. It means tank fist, and it's one of the deadliest anti-tank weapons on the battlefield. It fires a 140-millimeter rocket at ranges of up to 60 meters and can penetrate 200 millimeters of armor, unleashing a devastating explosion inside.
And they fire at us. It missed. It missed the tank. I didn't need any orders or anything like that. Your own sense, I just pressed the old solenoid to machine gun the hell out of him. And I heard a sickening clack. I said, Spencer, the .30 caliber is jammed. And this time they were just starting to get up. He says 75 millimeters loaded, and all you have to do is just turn your heel and press that solenoid. And I let that solenoid go in. I hit right into them. And the odd part of it is, the kid was still standing with his hands in the air, and he was holding his stubs up. So anyway, we went on.
Marshall and his crew dodge the advancing Germans for days and eventually make it back to Allied lines. On December 22nd, the German push towards the Meuse River bridges begins to slow. The rugged country northeast of Bastogne is a challenge, even for the Panthers of the 116th Panzer Division.
It was much more difficult in the Ardennes, because there were all these narrow forest roads. It was catastrophic because of all the close forest paths. Our tanks couldn't maneuver. The open field is typical landscape for tanks, while the Ardennes were poison for the tanks. This is where our Panther tank was hit. The first shell hit the tank track, and the tank became disabled. And if the one track keeps moving, the tank turns in a circle. It turned until it was standing at an angle with its corner facing the anti-tank gun. We had no idea that the Americans were firing phosphorus grenades. You can't really bring a tank down with phosphorus grenades. They just got lucky on the first shot that they hit and disabled our track.
White phosphorus rounds are incendiaries used to create smoke screens or mark enemy targets. They burn fiercely, but have little effect against the heavy armor on a Panther tank, unless they ignite exposed ammunition or fuel.
And there is an order that all German tank troops know. You can only get out of the tank when it is on fire. Not allowed to get off before that. Only when the tank is on fire. Most of the wounds suffered inside a tank are burns because of the fuel tank. If it gets hit full on, the tank catches fire immediately. And then there's only one thing you can do. Get out as fast as you can. We sat inside the tank and counted 22 hits on our tank. It's not very enjoyable. The only feeling you have is, am I going to survive this? Finally, the 22nd hit went into the hull of the tank where the fuel canisters were. When the fuel tank got hit, that's when it caught fire and we were allowed to get out.
By the evening of December 22nd, the German push to the Meuse River bridges has almost completely halted. Panzer columns clog the narrow Ardennes roads, and many tanks run out of fuel. The Germans now turn their attention back to Bastogne. But the Americans in the encircled town are getting help. 3 combat commands of General Patton's 4th Armored Division move north to break the German blockade.
We're almost halfway to Bastogne, and we reached a place called Vernon. And by the time we reached the bridge, it was getting late in the afternoon. The bridge was blown. The river was cold, raging. In no way could the tanks ford them, so we had to stop and put in a bridge. Now, our tanks were firing at the enemy across the river, and they was firing at us. So once we felt it was safe enough, the engineers came in and they put in the bridge, mostly under the cover of darkness. And our tanks started crossing the bridge. One tank, one tank, one tank. And then we were ready to rest for the night. I got word, no, keep moving. Patton said, I want them to move. Now here were the exhausted men. Now they were told to fight all night. And finally, at about first light, we reached the outskirts of Chaumont. Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, came a shot. Saw 3 jeeps from the 25th Cavalry hit. I immediately stopped my force. They must be down there in strength. I think I've got to have a planned operation.
It's a pincer maneuver that splits his force into 3 units. The tanks of C Company will attack from the west, while A Company attacks from the ridge east of the village. With his flanks protected, Erzik will drive his B Company down the main road and right into the center of Chaumont.
Now, if I were at Fort Knox, Kentucky, taking a tactics course, I probably would have gotten an A for my plan. But as you know, in combat, there are imponderables of the battlefield. C Company reports to me that 5 of its tanks, its first platoon, was completely